Hi, my name is McKenna, and my proposition is that the Titanic suffered a coal fire, which allowed her to be easily damaged and sink at such a rapid pace. On April 14th, 1912, the Titanic, a ship claimed to be called unsinkable, struck an iceberg on her starboard side, her right side, and sunk. The Titanic was a White Star Line ship, supposedly made with the finest accommodations and most luxurious materials. So if she was in fact unsinkable, why did she sink so rapidly and on her very first voyage? That's because, unknown to most, the Titanic suffered a coal fire, ironically on the same exact side that she struck the iceberg, and the Titanic weakened her steel so much that the iceberg easily penetrated the steel and allowed the water to spill over her watertight bulkheads, leading to her demise. My three claims to prove this as factual are as follows: that a 30-foot-long diagonal marking indicated by the fire was discovered on her starboard side where the coal was stored. The fire was known about before sailing, but not fought until after departing, and that the fire made her steel immensely vulnerable to damage. My first claim, that there is a 30-foot-long diagonal marking on her starboard side caused by the fire, was reported by the New York Times. Photographs of the Titanic were found in the attic of descendants of Harland and Wolff, which were the company that built the Titanic. And they were taken to Imperial College in London, where experts looked at them and it was concluded that it was most likely caused by a fire in the coal bunker of the ship, which are 3-story-foot-high rooms where coal is stored. In a documentary called Titanic: The New Evidence, they stated this marking was to be found on coal bunker number 6. That's ironically exactly where the iceberg struck. A letter to the Board of Trade officials expressing a concern about the ship's steel was made, and they asked the Titanic to be made with special quality steel, but as a response, they stated that the ship would be made with ordinary steel throughout the vessel. This steel suffered from a lot of cracking and has the capability to fail if impacted, and does not cope well under extreme heat. My second claim, that the fire was known about but downplayed. The documentary stated that the fire was known about but was not fought until after they had departed Southampton. Her departure had been delayed multiple times, so eyewitnesses who had reported seeing smoke coming from her hull were told to keep their mouths shut to avoid the journey being canceled and prevent loss of profit. Out of 100 crew members working below decks, only 8 chose to continue on with the journey as well. The Smithsonian Institute reported that the trial after the sinking was led by a shipping interest judge. In fact, he presided at the Shipwrights Guild 4 years earlier and had been quoted to say, "May nothing ever adversely affect the great carrying power of this wonderful country." He disputed the case, closed down efforts to pursue the fire, and concluded that the iceberg was a single factor in the sinking. And lastly, my third claim, that the fire made her steel more vulnerable to damage. Coal's ability to heat itself is caused by an increase of temperature when coal is gathered together, and occurs when coal is kept at very low temperatures. The rate of oxidation is generally slow, but increases as the temperature around it rises. If the heat cannot be released, it then gets absorbed into the coal, and the process is called a thermal runaway. So the coal heats up, there's no way to release the heat, which then keeps increasing the coal's heat and causes a fire. Purdue University stated that a coal fire in a contained space like the one in the Titanic would have reached temperatures close to 1,832 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, it is quoted that exposed steel would take about 25 minutes to lose about 60% of its strength and stiffness. And as you keep increasing the temperature of the steel, it becomes softer and weaker, being more vulnerable to damage. The fire also broke many watertight bulkheads, which made it possible for water to spill over top and engulf the rest of their ship, as reported by Titanic in New Evidence. In conclusion, the Titanic suffered a coal fire on her right starboard side where she struck the iceberg, and because of her weakened steel, she was easily and heavily damaged and sank at a much more rapid pace than she would have if the fire would have not occurred.
All right, so the proposition is clearly stated at the beginning. Now, you do have a preview, and I thought that it was going to be pretty straightforward, but as you're presenting it, when you watch back, you're going to notice that it all turns into one long sentence, and you don't really distinguish what the supporting points are from one another. In the body of the speech, you do. So I thought, structurally I could follow what you were saying inside the speech, but in the preview, it was like you started with number one, and then I never heard a number two or a number three or 4 or 5 or anything else. It was all just first of all, and then it all just went. And when I look back, I can see where those things were, but it was a little bit confusing. So you want to make sure that you're consistent about that. I couldn't tell you exactly what the first point was, except that I know that there was this 35-foot marking. That's a piece of evidence, not a claim. So what you want to do is you want to say that you want to say that there is evidence that a fire existed, and then the 35-foot marking, that is the proof for that particular claim. At the moment, that's the only physical evidence that you cite, and then you've got some other information that suggests that there were there was from the new evidence book and from the documentary that there was the markings were on coal burner number 6. I thought that was pretty good. The eyewitness stuff is a little bit thin. This is somebody's claim that says shut up and say nothing, and then nobody apparently said anything, so therefore there was a cover-up that's going on. I think that's a little bit problematic. If you had some of those people who afterwards did say something and talked about it, then we ought to be citing them in the presentation. You should say, when this happened, people came out of the woodwork and said, hey, there was a fire, what the hell was going on, this should never have left the port. The 92 people who worked on the boat and decided to get off, the implication is that they were all afraid because there was a fire. Let's hear from those folks. But I don't know if there was no coverage. I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, we've got a number that they got off, so where's the information that suggests that that's the reason they got off? I'm not sure that that's enough to make the point that you're making on that particular issue. You explain what was likely to have happened or what you believe is going to have happened. Here's a thing that's a little hard for me to understand, and that's why I think there needs to be a little bit more context. The notion that there's a fire on the ship that is so contained that nobody is worried about it who's getting on the boat, or that the other crew or the other folks aren't worried about it. They think, oh, it's fine, this is a normal sort of behavior. I need to have some context for that, because to me, I'm thinking, well, if I got on a boat and it's like a fire, there's no smoke, you don't see it, that kind of thing, there's no chemical smell that's going on, and it went on for 3 days, and how it goes on for 3 days without burning through the coal and waking everybody up to what the heck's going on, I don't know how that happens. So I need a little bit of explanation of that. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I'm just saying, how did it happen? Because it's this interesting theory, especially if if it was going on before the boat left, then because what did they sink on the 3rd night of the trip, and so they say they've been going for 3 days since this fire supposedly broke out. I'm going, how does this fire go on without people knowing that it's happening? There has to be, it may be it's a particular kind of fire in the coal in this particular spot, and nobody's worried about it. I don't know. And so that's one of the things that undermines my willingness to accept the theory, although I think that there's evidence that there was a fire. Like I said, I think you did provide us with some evidence that, and there's a good explanation about how it would have affected that. That part, I think, seems like it's pretty much engineering stuff. If there was a fire, it would have had this effect, and it would have made these additional things likely to happen. Here's the question: could those things have happened without a fire? That's the part that I think would make your argument a little bit stronger, that it would have been impossible for these bulkheads to collapse or the steel to have altered in any particular way had a fire not been present, which is another indication that a fire must have existed. All right, thank you.